can have you. Okay, so we're going to start here. I'm Mike Tietze. I'm the general manager and coordinator for the GSA, and I'll just go to my left, and then we can have the board and TAC members introduce themselves.
Well, I'm John Burns with Environmental Science Associates. I'm here to speak about the fee calculator tool that we've built that will allow you to see and understand potential fees and options under fallowing and MLRP to understand those fees.
I'm Stina Cheaton, also with Environmental Science Associates. I support with the rules and regulations development and then also the groundwater accounting platform.
And I'm Ryan Aston with SCI Consulting Group, and we are the GSA's rate and fee consultants.
Okay, can I have the board members?
Your GSA board.
Christine McKenna, Stanislaus County.
Tim Johnson, alternate to the GSA board.
Hi, I'm Lacey McBride from Merced County.
Okay.
Yeah, clear. Alternate on the GSA board and on the PAC.
Okay, do we have anybody else from the board or the TAC? So I don't know that we need to go through introductions for everybody here. You know, we do value your participation and we'd like to get to know you individually. I just don't want to take up a lot of time on the agenda for that. And online, we do have Karen Whip, our board secretary. We have Chris Hepner from EKI, who's our consultant that's developing our land repurposing plan. We've got Alyssa DeVincentis and McCall Teague from Formation, who is supporting GSA staff. Kristen Lindhart with EKI. And we've got our counsel, Caitlin Bursey, online. And then a number of different folks. I believe we have Rob Kostlevy from Stanislaus County online as well. So welcome, everybody. I think what we'll start with is item number 2, which is a public comment. And there will be opportunity for you to provide comments and thoughts and your feedback, as we go. But if you have public comment that you want to make at this point to the board and to the TAC, this is your opportunity to do so. Okay, hearing none. We'll just go ahead and we'll proceed into the presentations. If you have questions, we have few enough of us here to where if you have questions or you want to make comments, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll we'll call on you to make comments or questions right then. I mean, I think that this can work that way and maybe can work better with the number of us that's here. So that we can address your comments and concerns as we go. And then if there's comments or questions, if you could raise your hand or put your question into the chat. Savannah is monitoring that, and then she'll call on you to make sure that your questions or comments get answered. So let me maybe give a little bit of background before I turn this over to our fee consultant, Ryan. Next slide, please. Wow. Just a little bit of background regarding the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, in case there's folks here that are not familiar. It was passed in 2014. And it's a legislation to address groundwater overdraft and sustainable management of our groundwater basins that are heavily used, so medium and high priority basins they're called. So the requirements there were for those areas, those basins, to form groundwater sustainability agencies that completely cover the basins. Those agencies were tasked with developing and adopting groundwater sustainability plans and then implementing them. And for us, we're not considered critically overdrafted. So our timeline was to initially put a plan together by 2022 and then begin implementing it. And there's roughly, approaching 200 groundwater sustainability agencies in California that are going through this at the same time. Next slide. So of interest there is the sustainable yield, and that's the yield, the groundwater yield that can be supported annually for an extended period of time without causing what's called an undesirable result. And those undesirable results are chronically declining groundwater levels, water quality degradation, which can also happen when you overdraft. But which is not a big issue for us here. Reduction of groundwater storage, that means not having enough groundwater in storage for you to be able to use as you need to, when you need to. Land subsidence, which we don't consider a big issue in our area, but we do have an area where there's been a little bit of subsidence, and so we're trying to stay on top of that. We don't expect that to get real serious for us here, but we want to stay on top of it. Seawater intrusion, which is not an issue for us, and surface water depletion, which is an issue for us because our groundwater resources are connected to rivers that are heavily used in the area. So the Stanislaus and the Merced rivers, which are used by Merced Irrigation District, Turlock Irrigation District, and others. I'm sorry.
River, not Stanislaus.
Right. Sorry, I got Stanislaus on the brain. Next slide. So this slide shows our groundwater basin, roughly 140,000 acres, Tuolumne River on the north, Merced River on the south, San Joaquin River on the west, and Sierra Nevada bedrock on the east. And we have two groundwater sustainability agencies. We're the East Turlock GSA. West Turlock GSA is Turlock Irrigation District and a number of cities there and the two counties. We are operating under one groundwater sustainability plan cooperatively with WTS GSA. And we submitted a plan originally in 2022. We heard back at the beginning of this year that DWR deemed it incomplete. So we had 6 months to submit a revised plan to address some deficiencies. And those deficiencies focus to a large extent on identifying the projects and management actions that we're trying to fund through this fee. Those were on the agenda before, but we had to clarify them and make specific commitments in order to address DWR's concerns. We still have not heard back from DWR. We expect to hear back from them probably by year's end if we've been approved. And so, I mean, we think we did a good job in responding, but we haven't heard back yet. So we are a joint powers authority of Eastside Water District and Belico Cortez Water District, which don't have access to significant surface water resources. They facilitate out-of-district deliveries by TID and some out-of-district deliveries by Merced Irrigation District. Merced Irrigation District on the North Side Canal Service Area, we've got about 4,000 acres. And then Merced County and Stanislaus County make up the remainder. Each of those entities has one member on the TAC and one member and an alternate on the board. We've got about 90,000 acres of high-value ag land, generally very productive. Of that, about 100,000 parcels are designated, 100,000 acres of parcels are designated as being irrigated, but the amount that's actually irrigated in fields is about 90,000 acres, mostly permanent crops. And little surface water availability, there is some, and we're working on getting access to more, but it's limited. And we have productive aquifers, but low recharge. Yes, sir, in the back.
What do the different colors mean on that map?
The question was, what do the different colors mean on the map? So the blue color is Eastside Water District. The reddish color in the southwest is Belico Cortez Water District. The green color is Merced Irrigation District. The yellow color is Merced County, and the orange color is Stanislaus County. Next slide. So
Mike, go back there.
yes.
But there's a dark green, what's the dark green?
The dark green is Turlock Lake, so it's not actually colored in. Well, that's actually part of WTS GSA because the TID facilities as well as the TID service area are considered part of West Turlock Subbasin GSA. So they have a little arm that extends into our area, and Turlock Lake is within their jurisdiction. So in the upper left-hand corner of this slide, you see what's a typical hydrograph, groundwater levels in a well. And in our area, our indicator wells, so we've monitored groundwater levels with roughly 20 wells that we have enforceable groundwater level standards for, and then about 20 other wells that help to tell us what to do. And the groundwater levels have been declining because the demand being put on the aquifer is greater than the amount of recharge, and it's not balanced. And as a result, in the lower right-hand corner, we have what's called a big cone of depression. So that's an internally drained area in the aquifers where the wells have pulled down the groundwater levels, and water is flowing into that cone of depression from the rivers. So that's kind of our concern that we're trying to rectify and make sure that it's sustainable in the long term. The GSP sets what are called minimum thresholds, which are enforceable management standards, and our groundwater levels are at or below the minimum thresholds for most of our wells. So that's what we're trying to rectify. Our estimate is that our demand exceeds the sustainable yield by about 96,000 acre feet. That's a very preliminary estimate. It's based on a groundwater model. Models are rough approximations. They help to guide our decision making, but we know that number is not correct. We know that it's either going to go up or down as we learn more, but we need to get started with something. So we're looking at that number. Based on that number, our net groundwater demand needs to be reduced by about 40%. We're not going to get too excited about that 40% number at this point. At this point, in the next 10 years or so, we want to decrease net demand by about 20%. Then we'll know a lot more where we need to go from there. But the model's telling us probably about 40% is within the realm of reason. So our objective is to arrest the groundwater decline by 2027, start turning things around, and achieve sustainable yield by 2042. That's a heavy lift. It basically means that there's not enough water to do what collectively our agricultural community in this area wants to do for most landowners. Next slide. So how do we do that? We do that through projects and management actions. Projects are ways that we can bring more water resources either as a supply, that's called in lieu recharge. Basically, if you get surface water, you're not pumping groundwater. It's the best kind of recharge you can have, and it makes for a more secure water future, the maximum extent to which we can bring that surface water in. But it's limited. We're limited to TID, MID, and a few water right holders on the rivers. So management actions are the other way. Those are focused on demand management. So repurposing land, regulating pumping. And then operations help to pull everything together and fulfill our obligations to the state for reporting so that we can stay out of trouble with them. So next slide. So what we're going to talk about today is projects and management actions and how to fund them. And there's a few different guiding objectives. So for land repurposing, let me maybe back up and say this. 20% is a big change. And what we want to do is we want to fund management actions that help to support an orderly transition. anything that we support through incentives is not free money. It's coming from you. I mean, to the extent that we can get grants, we're pursuing grants so that we don't have to carry this burden alone. And the state has signaled and repeatedly been willing to provide grant funds, but it's not enough. And so we need to balance between the incentives that we can provide and the projects that we can afford, and how much individual growers can afford to be taxed in a groundwater extraction fee and still remain in business. So that's the tough question here that we're trying to find the right balance to. So in order to do that, what we want is an integrated approach that provides that when we are incentivizing repurposing land, we want to see multiple benefits, and we want to see it integrated into active agricultural operations to the extent that we can. So that's what we're trying to incentivize. There's other ways to do it. We're not going to say no to anything. We're going to consider anything. But our approach is to use this multi-benefit land approach integrated into ag operations. We want to go back. We want sound financing strategies. We want to understand that balance and realistically what we need in order to move forward, and also realistically what people can afford, because we don't want to achieve sustainability by driving people out of business. We want to preserve the high value agricultural land and economy, and we want to promote grower implemented solutions where you can choose from a menu of options, because you know your business best. So we want to provide you a menu of options, as opposed to, I mean, we don't have authority to tell you what to do anyways. So what we want to do is provide you a menu of options so that you can decrease the groundwater demand of your operation. Next slide. So to do that, for our operational assessment, so this is for just operation, compliance, monitoring, reporting. We passed an operational assessment this spring, and that's levied by the tax assessor per acre of land. And for an irrigated parcel, it's $17.75 an acre, and for non-irrigated, it's $1.54 an acre. The purpose of our meeting today is to talk about a groundwater use fee. And that will be used to fund, if it's passed, will be used to fund our multi-benefit land repurposing program. So that's being started with a $9 million grant from DOC. That's what's kickstarting it. A rotational fallowing program, a well mitigation program that's for folks whose domestic wells are going dry to make them whole. That's a high priority for the DWR and also for us. Transitional water payments to TID under our groundwater accounting framework that we entered into with them. I can provide more information about that a little bit later. And then replenishment water payments. So let me maybe talk a little bit about the last two. The transitional water payments, we entered into an agreement with TID that accounts for the groundwater and groundwater use in the basin, and accounts for the fact that groundwater is leaked from their operations and has been drawn from their operations and is part of the groundwater that we pump. For the purposes of an agreement with them, we've agreed that that's 140,000 acre feet per year. They've agreed to allocate 20,000 acre feet per year to us. And then they've also agreed to provide us additional replenishment water as part of that agreement. So it's, I don't think anybody's completely happy with that agreement, but it keeps us working cooperatively with them. And they're a very important partner for us in terms of being able to manage the basin sustainably and provide replenishment water when it's available. And I think most of you are probably familiar with that program. So I'll leave it there. So, well, replenishment water is out of district deliveries that folks can use for irrigation in lieu of groundwater. And we plan to develop the infrastructure to deliver more of that water in years when it's available.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
That, of that 140,000, say that 20,000 is used for pumping back to East Turlock.
So our groundwater, our current groundwater pumping is around 240,000, a little bit more than 240,000 acre feet is what we're estimating. And of that, 140,000 in this agreement is allocated to TID. And we will, under the agreement, we would make payments to TID for that 140,000 at a rate of $50 an acre foot. And then that fund would be used to fund groundwater sustainability projects in our groundwater sustainability plan. Yeah, and the 20,000 acre feet is put on our side of the ledger by TID.
Whether it's a dry or wet year.
Doesn't matter if it's a wet or dry year. We don't know our basin, our groundwater basin well enough to operate it like a reservoir with changed prescriptions from year to year. So we're basing everything on longer term prescriptions. That may change as we learn more. Yes, anybody else? All right, well, with that, then so our groundwater management framework, this is kind of a busy slide, and it's really just intended to show you that we've been very busy putting together not only the, in the upper and the lower graph, the stepped red line are our reduction targets over time, time increases from left to right in the graphs. Those reduction targets are met by implementing projects and management actions. Those projects and management actions are funded by 3 different categories of fees that are shown in the upper right-hand graph. And when those are implemented, we project that our groundwater reduction target is going to follow the yellow line, which will meet the requirements of the stepped red line in terms of our reduction targets. So it's a network where everything fits together. And what we're talking about today is the funding component of it. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to.
Thank you, Mike. All right, everybody, I'm gonna walk through the proposed fee structure, describe a bit about the basis of these fees and kind of the way that they're intended to work. And then we'll pause for questions for a bit. And then after that, I'll get into a little more detail on the different programs that Mike was discussing that would be funded by this fee program. Thank you, Savannah. So a little bit of kind of legal background here. The basis for this fee legally stems from Water Code Section 10730.2, which references Prop 218 or a property related fee. Some of you may be familiar with that. It's a typical kind of water rate fee, although there are various types there. And the proposed fee would recover the cost of service provided to groundwater users who use more than 2 acre feet of groundwater per year. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act defines users who use less than 2 acre feet a year as de minimis users. So we're looking at non-de minimis users here. As Mike mentioned before, the operational assessment has a charge for irrigated and non-irrigated, but this is really just for folks who are using water for irrigation purposes. And the idea behind that is that in accordance with the pumping reduction framework that Mike was describing, that the service provided by these projects and management actions is necessitated by larger quantities of groundwater use. So as we've gone through this and sort of separated things out in terms of having the operational budget and the project and management action budget, that kind of leaves us with this remaining part. And that's what we're trying to get done here.
What does de minimis mean?
Yeah, so de minimis, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act defines de minimis groundwater users as those who use less than 2 acre feet a year for non-commercial purposes. So what that generally means is like a rural domestic, well owner, somebody who's just using water for domestic purposes and maybe some garden irrigation. Mm-hmm.
We've also deliberately set out as a GSA to classify small stock wells in that same category.
Thank you, Mike. A little more detail here. For agricultural landowners that irrigate, this groundwater use will be identified by evapotranspiration measurements of consumed groundwater use. And this is important, and we're going to talk about this in some detail here. But these measurements are gathered using a combination of satellite data as well as on-field sensors. For non-agricultural users that exceed de minimis use, so we're looking at like dairy, poultry, food processing centers, those folks will have their fees calculated to or based on self-reporting. Obviously, you can't use evapotranspiration if there's no crops being grown, so that's a slightly different situation. But the evapotranspiration or ET will be used for agricultural irrigators. Another thing to note is that the GSA plans to allow property owners to appeal their fee calculation based on the evapotranspiration, and folks will have the ability to submit meter data instead of that. But that meter data will then have to be converted to consumptive use as opposed to applied use. And I'm going to talk about what that means in a little more detail in just a moment.
Question. Yeah. So if you're going to evaluate how much water we use based on evapotranspiration data, what if you have a real wet spring? Are you we're not irrigating yet, but we're definitely, having evapotranspiration. Are we going to get charged for that too, or?
So the evapotranspiration takes into account precipitation.
Okay.
Yeah, we're kind of wrapped up in all that. And I think if you give me 1 second on the next slide, I think it touches on that in a little more detail as well. This is a kind of a nice graphic that explains this visually. And you can see the precip there on the top coming down, the irrigation coming into the system as well. And then you have two things coming out. Oh, sorry. You have evapotranspiration on the top, and you have runoff and percolation on the bottom. So this is really trying to illustrate the difference between applied water and consumed water, right? The applied water will always be more than the consumed. The consumed water is what is being used by the crop. So the rest of the water leaves the system. Whether that's from runoff or percolation, it's in the root zone, it's recharging the aquifer. Either way, it's not being used by the crop.
Ryan, to your question, we measure the ET from satellite data, and then we subtract precipitation or effective precipitation from it, and then we subtract the surface water that's delivered. So what's left over then is the groundwater that's used. So if you've got surface water, there's less groundwater that you're charged for. And if it's a wet year and you're irrigating less, then there's less groundwater that you'd be charged for.
Little different thing, but say you've got, your existing ranch, you don't have TID on it now, but you have the ability to get TID on the high flow years, okay? If you were to put in, say, a pond or something and try to bank some of that water, are you going to get any credit for that, or?
So what we've got in our rules and regs so far is how we would deal with replenishment water, how we deal with projects that put ponds or basins on your property, and how we would incentivize those things. And early next year, we're going to be talking about credits and transfers. So it's on our radar screen, but we haven't adopted policies for that yet.
I know, like, we've got a block of walnuts that's real weak because it's extra sandy right there, So we're kind of contemplating, well, we tear that out, put a pond, it's real sandy. It's more sandy than the rest of the sand. Maybe that's a good spot to have a recharge,
And we want to incentivize those kinds of projects. We also have a call for projects application that we'd love to talk to you about that and begin to learn more about what kind of projects people have in mind, so that we can figure out how to plan for them and how to best incentivize them. But yeah, on-farm basins that either store runoff or that store available water from TID, or in the future, we're working toward working with TID to use their facilities to deliver stormwater. If that can be stored for use and recharge, that's a good thing. We want to incentivize it. If it adds a net recharge component after you get done using your credit, that's probably the balance that we're trying to achieve. So, we want enough of a credit to where we recognize, and I'm just saying this policy that we're working towards is enough of a credit to incentivize those kinds of projects. But if we're paying for them, we can't give you a complete credit for everything that you put in, because if you're taking it back out, there's no benefit for what we're trying to accomplish. Does that make sense?
I just mean a benefit to that grower on their land. I mean, if you're putting TID water, or like you say, stormwater comes down the TID canal in winter. I'm just wondering if you're gonna be able to utilize more of your property, you know, if you're gonna get credit against what your ET is, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the answer to that is for the percolation, for the recharge component of it.
Yeah.
That's a policy that we're working on. So, you know, stand by on that. And if you're interested in hearing more about it, we also have like an ad hoc group with growers in it where, you know, as we develop ideas, we run them past our growers to get input and make sure that we don't do anything stupid.
Basically, the answer is you don't quite know yet.
TBD,
Yeah,
to be determined.
yeah, to be determined. It's on our radar screen.
That said, as you can see in this equation, applied surface water is subtracted from that calculation. So that's something that folks will be able to report, and that will be reduced from the ET. So the consumed groundwater is calculated by taking the total consumed water, subtracting the ET from precipitation, from rainfall, and the ET from applied surface water. Some key takeaways here. Oh, sorry, I'm not quite done with that one. Essentially, what the GSA is doing is using ET as a basin-wide tool here to measure groundwater use, because it's available and it can be compared to a historic baseline. As I mentioned earlier, growers will have the opportunity to appeal and to use meter data if they choose. And just for reference here, because ET again is less than irrigation demand, the average groundwater ET of an almond orchard in the GSA is about 2.33 acre feet per acre per year, compared to a commonly assumed irrigation demand of 3 to 3.4 acre feet per year. So again, these numbers we're showing you are not applied water, they're the consumed water, and so they're going to be less. So in this table, what we're showing you here is the way that we have categorized groundwater use. And so the way the fees would be calculated, the proposed fees would be calculated, is by categorizing groundwater use on an acre foot per acre basis. So you can see at the bottom, category 0, this is groundwater use within the estimated native sustainable yield. Right above that, category 1 is groundwater use within the intended long-term additional sustainable yield once sustainable thresholds are met. Category 2 is the transitional groundwater use. So this is groundwater use above that estimated sustainable yield. And category 3 is groundwater use above the use reduction target. So those charts Mike was showing you with sort of those shifting or decreasing reduction targets, that's the basis there for the threshold of that category. If you could click it one more time. So in that table on the right here, what this shows is those thresholds, not conceptually, but in numbers. So that category 0 is 0 to a half acre foot of ET per acre. Category 1 is a half acre foot to 1.1 acre feet of ET per acre. Category 2 is 1.1 to 1.6. And category 3 is greater than 1.6. And I have that asterisk there because that threshold, that 1.6, that's what will change over time as those different reduction goals hit. So this one here is a 10% reduction goal, and then the 20% reduction goal would be 1.4. So that we do anticipate a change happening there in that category, but this is where it would start out right here. So these are, oh, thank you.
But there might be some.
No. These are the year 1 proposed fees. And so these line up with those different categories that I was just showing you. So starting at the bottom, 0 to a half acre foot per acre, there is no charge for that category groundwater use. And then for the half acre foot to 1.1, it'd be just under $58. From 1.1 to 1.6, it'd be 138 and change. And in year one, category 3, the GSA intends to charge that same category 2 rate. We do have a higher rate for category 3, but that's not set to kick in until the second year. And a part of the idea there is to allow folks to be able to adjust and get used to this and understand what's going on and what the options are in terms of being able to prepare for them.
That's a per acre foot.
Per acre foot, yes. Sorry, what was that?
Per acre foot or per acre?
Per acre foot, per acre foot. And you'll notice there's less than an acre foot in each category, right? So it's for that, you know, half acre foot or give or take in each category.
Per acre foot per acre.
Yeah, per acre foot per acre, yes.
I think the fee calculator will help.
Yeah, and we do have a presentation or a demonstration later of the fee calculator. And so we're going to plug in some properties and kind of let you see how this all breaks down. And then for those that are interested, we can do that, you know, individually with your property at some point as well. Oh, yes.
So those fees would be over the minimum 24 inches that you have allocated?
So it would, the charge kicks in after that first half acre foot of ET. Yeah.
So after the first 6 inches,
You don't get 2 feet.
they kick in.
You don't get 2 feet free. Okay.
You get 6 inches.
You get 6 inches.
Yeah.
And all those prices stack.
So it's,
So if you're using, you know, 2 acre feet, you're paying 57 plus 138 plus 138.
you are just for that amount within that category. So it'd be the 5781 times the 0.6 acre feet in that category. So if you get up to a higher category, you're not paying that higher rate for all of that groundwater use, only for the groundwater use that's within that category.
It's like your taxes, how you step into the tax brackets with different levels of income.
So assuming that 2.3 you talked about, what would be the total?
We've got a demonstration later because it depends on the amount of acres and some other factors. We do have a demonstration later to show you how that breaks out. So the other thing I wanted to talk about here, I mentioned earlier, those rates I just showed you are the year one proposed rates. We can sort of break down the proposed structure in 3 different phases. The first phase would be just year one. At this point, category 2 is defined by that 10% reduction target. So that's that 1.6. And the category 3 rate will not be charged in year one, as I mentioned. So that category 2 rate is applied, you know, to everything within category 2 and above. Phase 2 would be years 2 and 3. At this point, that category 2 threshold doesn't change yet from 1.6. So it stays the same during that period. But at this point, the category 3 rate would begin. So ET within category 3 would be charged that higher rate. And then phase 3 would be years 4 through 8. And at this point, that category 2 threshold would shift. So it would be defined by the 20% reduction target. So that upper threshold would be 1.4 acre feet per acre, not 1.6. At that point, the fee structure would remain consistent going forward here. So we don't foresee any changes starting at year 4, you kind of have what it's going to be.
So phase 1 is 2025.
Yes.
So they're gonna start charging us this year, those rates you're talking about.
This upcoming year, if the fee is successful, yes. And I'm going to talk about what that process looks like. Yeah.
Maybe also to clarify the reporting period. So this is for a reporting period, which is November 1st, 2024 to October 31st of 2025. So we would expect to see bills in January of 2026 for the 2025 reporting period.
I don't know if that's been completely ironed out. There may be bills may come out in two portions.
That's automatically on your property tax bill?
At this point, the GSA is considering billing property owners directly. Again, I don't think that's set in stone either, but those are the 2 options: is property tax bills or billing directly.
Yeah, what we've talked about is billing directly as opposed to going through the assessor's office. Because the assessor's office, there's, we need to report to them what the annual assessments are in August. And so there'd be, a big lag time. So what we're thinking of is billing directly But then if folks don't pay a bill, then it rolls over onto their property tax assessment.
So on this screen, and it may be a little hard to see up there, but we do have handouts in the back that have this. You can look a little more up close. As I said before, what I showed you was that phase one, that first year rate. So that's that box on the left. If you click, I think one more time, maybe twice, get those first two circles to come up. So you'll notice there that, again, we're defining category 2 by that 10% reduction target. So that 1.6 acre feet per acre. And you have that category 2 rate there, that 138.61 that's applied to category 3 use. If you click again, phase 2 sees that category 3 rate kick in of 317. And that's still at that point defined by the 1.6 acre feet per acre. And then going into phase 3, starting in 2028, that's when the threshold for category 2 shifts and is now defined by that 20% reduction target. And so you have that 1.4 as opposed to that 1.6 being the upper threshold of category 2.
I'm a little confused. I hear you say 20% reduction target, but you mentioned 40% earlier. So which is it?
20%. The 40% is our estimate of where we need to be in 2042, and that's probably going to change.
Oh.
And, you know, I mean, the more surface water we can get in, the lower that number gets. But we'll also learn more about that number, you know, as we go and see how the aquifer responds.
But does that mean you're going to look at 20% of all that acreage being out of production, right? Or non-irrigated at least, right?
The 20% is, it's a net number. And so additional recharge helps that. Additional surface water offsetting groundwater use helps that. And demand reduction or, you know, repurposing, pumping less groundwater helps that.
I guess what I'm kind of wondering is, you know, we're talking about the water aspect of it. What the hell is it going to do to air quality around here? You got all this acreage fallowing, and you know, the wind blows in this sand. It creates a heck of a lot of dust. You're gonna have a little dust bowl around here.
So that's why we want to implement this multi-benefit land repurposing program, because that would. So there's two things. If a grower decides they're going to fallow land on their own, okay, that's going to be up to them, and there's no requirements from us.
It's going to be a little more.
Right. So, but what we plan to do is to offer incentives for a land fallowing program and for the multi-benefit land repurposing program. For the land fallowing program, we'll pay you per acre per year to fallow land, but we'll have certain minimum requirements to make sure that there's no nuisance. Okay. So to address the air quality issue. And the multi-benefit land repurposing goes one step further and it says, well, there we're going to look for other benefits. So we may say that, well, you qualify for that if you use if you cover crop with a special seed mix, like a pollinator-friendly seed mix or something like that, that benefits the agricultural community and prevents nuisance and promotes more infiltration of rainwater that falls on those fields where the roots have broken up the soil. So that's the idea, is that we would incentivize that to make it a more orderly transition so that we don't have these area-wide issues that are going to affect the environment, quality of life, property values, any number of things. So we're trying to minimize that by collecting fees that will allow us to implement these different programs.
A lot of unforeseen consequences that could happen there.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
Is there any talk with the tax assessors to change the tax base for fallow land when it comes to useless?
We have not had those conversations. I expect that there probably will be conversations regarding, land values, because land values have already plummeted. What we are, as to what we can do, what we're saying is that if somebody fallows land, they're not going to be charged for the ET on that land. Okay. And the allocation that you get, the water allocation, is per parcel acre, not per field acre. But if you take a field out of production and we pay you to do that, we also get your allocation. If you do it on your own, you can keep your allocation, but we don't pay you. So we're trying to build those different options into the fee calculator so that you can begin to play with it and see how it will work for you. I mean, just hearing about it probably just makes your head spin because it's a bit complicated. But once you work through the fee calculator, I think you'll be able to see how those different options might apply and work for you to bring your fees down to a manageable level while you retool your operation to have less groundwater demand. So that's the idea, is that we make options available for you to achieve those demand reductions in a way that is workable for you, so that we're not just saying, you know, what the state, for example, would say if it was a state takeover, is they would just say, we don't care how you do it, we just need less water. We're going to charge you a penalty if you charge, you know, and that's what we're concerned about there is that would be sort of an uncontrolled repurposing of land, which will hurt property values, air quality, any number of other things. And so that's what we don't want to see happen.
I think, should we keep going on fees? And
Yes.
there's, I think, a lot of stuff to talk about with the MLRP program that we'll cover later.
Thank you.
This next slide illustrates everything that I had on that last one, but it's just kind of in a timeline sense. So you can see phase 1 is year 1, phase 2 is the next 2 years, and then phase 3 is those final 5 years there. And those same rates are shown here. It's just kind of visually showing it kind of on a timeline as they're phased in. Next, I want to talk a bit about the fee implementation process, how this works, and kind of what the procedural requirements are for this type of fee, which, as I mentioned, is a property-related fee, which stems from Proposition 218. So the way this works, per the state constitution, is that notice of the proposed fee is mailed to all affected property owners, so essentially all property owners who would be charged. And then there is a protest period in which property owners may submit written protest to the GSA. And it's 1 protest per parcel is the way that breaks down. At the end of that period, it's required to be 45 days, but we'll likely do a bit longer than that. At the end of that period, the GSA board reconvenes to hold a protest hearing. And if the number of parcels for which protest was submitted represents a majority, so 50% or more, the affected parcels, then the fee cannot be imposed. So when 50% or more submit that protest, that's called a majority protest. And at that point, it halts the process. If that does not happen, if that majority protest does not happen, then the board may vote to adopt the proposed fee program. So this is what we're looking to do here in terms of implementing this. We have a target of January for mailing out those notices and then reconvening a little later on in 2021. The other kind of procedural part of this is the way that the notice gets sent out is it has to illustrate the maximum rates. So those phase 3 rates that I had shown you before, those are sort of the legal part of this that you will either be protesting or not protesting. We do plan to include in the notice information related to these planned phases, related to, for example, not charging the category 3 rate in the first year, and that category 2 threshold being 10% instead of 20, the 1.6 instead of 1.4. So we will include information on that, but this is sort of the mechanism that you'll have the opportunity to protest is those maximum rates. This is a tentative timeline for fee implementation. We're having a community fee workshop today. This Thursday, in a few days, the draft fee study will be presented to the board. And we'll come back in December, having refined that draft a bit, and we'll have that final fee study presented to the board at a special December meeting. We plan to mail notices out in January, likely reconvene in March 2025 for that protest hearing. And if the fee program is adopted, if a majority protest is not achieved, initial invoices may be sent out. We're looking at maybe May or June. So not completely sure about that last one there, but that's kind of our general plan at this point. I do want to talk in a little more detail about these different programs that the proposed fee would fund, but I wanted to pause now if there are any other questions that we can address before getting into the weeds a bit more.
There's a question.
This is all based on land IQ.
It is largely based on, yes, land IQ's measurements of evapotranspiration in some water.
And it's still 90 days to get your results for each field.
30 days from the end of the previous month. So we get it about a month in the rear, and then it's available on the groundwater accounting platform as soon as we get that. But if you do have surface water, we're requiring surface water reporting at the very end of the year. So I think our kind of general recommendation is you can use the groundwater accounting platform to see historic usage, and then you kind of make a plan and you can check against that plan on the platform, but it's not real time going to tell you month to month exactly what you've used, especially if you have surface water. So it's a bit of doing the calculations up front at the start of the year and making a plan and then executing that plan and having a sense of where you're going to land, like more of a budgeting exercise.
So along with doing land IQ, you also have to keep track of irrigation as well, like with meters, or is it just all based off land IQ?
The GSA tracks consumed groundwater through land IQ and then doing that minus effective precipitation every month and then minus any surface water that's been delivered. If you do want to potentially appeal or you want to have a double check, you'd want to take a monthly meter reading, and we have some preliminary guidance about what that looks like. And then at the end of the year, you could do your own comparison of meter data, convert that to consumed data, compare it against your consumed groundwater from the groundwater accounting platform, and then you could make a decision about if you wanted to appeal or not. But at this point, ET is law of the land. And then if you do have meters, you can record that data and we can calculate at the end of the year to do a comparison.
Any other questions before we move on? There'll be more time at the end as well. All right. So I wanted to chat in a bit more detail about these different programs and sort of how we've apportioned costs of those programs to the different categories. That was kind of the exercise here in terms of coming up with those variable rates for the different categories, is certain costs or certain portions of cost are assigned to specific categories. So Mike described these in a little bit of detail earlier, but we have rotational land fallowing with incentive payments for doing so. We have a well mitigation program, the transitional water and the replenishment water, and then the multi-benefit land repurposing, or MLRP, also with incentive payments. I do have a more detailed budget in a second handout back there. If you didn't get it, happy to discuss that in more detail. But for this purpose, I just at least wanted to illustrate what that total budget number is for these different kind of phases. And you can see there that phase 1 and phase 2, it's about $10.1 million per year. And then for phase 3, it goes down to about $7.7 million per year. So that's with all those different programs with sort of variable costs assigned to each year. And then some of those costs assigned to category 1, some to category 2, and some to category 3. So for rotational land fallowing, as Mike described, this supports general land fallowing efforts. So this is not the MLRP program. It's a little different than that. But the goal here is still to induce groundwater demand reduction. The cost allocation for the categories here, category 0 is not allocated any costs, as that's true for all these different programs. In this case, category 1 is also not assigned any costs from this program. Category 2 is assigned the total cost for rotational land fallowing. Now, category 3 is a little bit different because category 3 includes groundwater use above that use reduction target. And these budgets are designed to work with what our targets are. So what category 3 is calculated on is the costs of additional land fallowing if those goals are not met. So there would be additional costs to mitigate that use if those goals are not met. So category 3 is calculated a little differently there. But we do have the total projected cost for rotational land fallowing assigned to category 2 in this case. So for the well mitigation program, this, as Mike described, is supporting efforts to mitigate the effects of overpumping on basin wells. The preliminary cost allocation here, category 0, no cost allocation. Category 1 is about 40% of the projected costs, and category 2 is about 60% of the projected costs. Category 3 is based on, again, if those reduction goals are not met, and it assumes that the well mitigation costs will be twice the category 1 rate. So it assumes that there'll have to be some additional well mitigation efforts if those goals are not met. Transitional water, as we talked about earlier, refers to groundwater owned by TID and used within the GSA. So these will be paid to TID under the accounting agreement. Pending discussion with TID, some of these costs may contribute to GSP project implementation. GSA is keeping an eye on that. We don't have an exact answer of how that will work out at this point, but that's what we are looking at. In this case, category 0 has no cost assigned. And then for the other 3 categories, we've just used that proportional share of transitional water, taken that 140,000 acre feet and spread it out proportionally across those 3 categories. Replenishment water is done in the same way. So category 0 is not assigned any costs, and then we're just taking that proportional share of that water on down through the categories here. Replenishment water costs may increase over time as project capacity is built out. So if we get the ability to bring more in, if we get the ability to have more of that water, those costs may increase. Obviously, it's hard to know exactly how that's going to work out, but that is something the GSA is keeping an eye on here as well. And lastly, the multi-benefit land repurposing program. So as Mike talked about, this supports land repurposing that has multiple benefits. So it's, again, different than that rotational land fallowing. So this would fund incentive payments for growers to participate in the program. And those incentives may vary, or they will vary depending on the repurposing strategy. So whether it's acres being taken out of production, whether it's a recharge basin, there's different things there, and they'll each have different payments associated with them. In this case, category 0, again, has no cost assigned to it. Category 1 has costs for the MLRP maintenance fund, which is a part of this, and 20% of the MLRP reserve fund, which is intended to cover unforeseen circumstances and potential increases in incentive payments due to various factors, where the market is and what the value of taking land out of production is. So that reserve fund is intended to sort of create a bit of a buffer there so that the GSA can pivot and make sure they're taking advantage of those opportunities as they come up. For category 2, we have the cost for MLRP implementation, and then the bulk of that reserve fund I was just describing, 80% of it. And then category 3 has no cost allocation for MLRP. As I said earlier, category 3 is beyond the planned amount of groundwater use. And so we've included the entire budget for MLRP within categories 1 and 2. So I think that wraps up generally kind of what that proposed fee structure looks like. And I ended on the MLRP program because we have Chris Hepner from EKI here, I believe, on Zoom, and he's going to talk in a little more detail about what some of those programs and options look like for MLRP.
Great, thanks, Ryan. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Hepner. I'm with EKI Environment and Water. We're a water resources consulting firm based here in California that provides support to agencies throughout the Central Valley on groundwater management issues, including SGMA compliance and implementation. We are the lead consultant for the East Turlock Subbasin GSA's multi-benefit land repurposing program, in charge of developing the multi-benefit land repurposing plan that I'll be introducing today. Next slide, please. As Mike mentioned earlier, the MLRP project is one of East Turlock GSA's several methods to help steer the basin towards sustainability. The MLRP is a grant-funded program with funding coming from the state's Department of Conservation. The grant award of approximately $8.9 million is dedicated to the tasks shown here, including developing a multi-benefit agricultural land repurposing plan, developing and implementing land repurposing projects, improving local capacity of partner entities such as the resource conservation districts to support the program into the future. And the grant program funding period lasts through March 2027, at which point the program will be transitioned to being funded by the GSA itself. Next slide, please. So as with the other programs discussed here today, the MLRP program's primary purpose is to reduce groundwater demand through repurposing of agricultural lands to other less water-intensive land uses. What sets the MLRP apart from other programs is its emphasis on achieving additional types of benefits to groundwater sustainability, habitat, disadvantaged communities, and the local economy. The long-term goal of the MLRP is to achieve demand reduction equivalent to about 21,000 acres of agricultural land, with a near-term goal of about 5,000 acres worth of demand reduction. The program's core values include the use of strategies that integrate with the working lands, targeting the less productive lands, promoting projects that are self-implementable by landowners, and using streamlined approaches to design and permitting. Essentially, the MLRP is intended to be one option among the several that landowners can choose from to meet their own needs and goals. Next slide, please. So several land repurposing project types or alternatives have been developed at this point, each of which has various benefits to the groundwater system, to the broader environment, and to local communities. While these possible MLRP project types are being specifically developed for streamlined use, it's important to note that other types of projects may be eligible for MLRP grant funding if they're consistent with the program's overall goals and provide multiple benefits. The GSA is very interested to hear from landowners about the types of projects they might have in mind, and we're releasing today an open call for project concepts to try to gather that input from you, which I'll talk more about in just a moment. Next slide, please. So before I get to the open call for project concepts, I wanted to provide a basic overview of the MLRP process. At this stage, we're in the outreach and planning phase, where we're defining the program's priorities with active input from stakeholders throughout the basin. This phase will culminate with a land repurposing plan document that describes the program, its goals, and how it will work. The next phase will be project development, solicitation, and selection, during which there will be an open application process, and the GSA will work to select projects, which will then go to DOC for their final funding approval. The last phase is project implementation, which is when the actual on-the-ground repurposing activities will take place. We're also looking at this stage at potential for pilot projects, which will be useful in helping define the processes used for the formal project solicitation. Next slide, please. Which brings me to the open call for demand reduction project concepts. As I mentioned, the GSA is very interested to hear what kinds of projects landowners may have in mind. So at this stage in plan development, we're looking for growers to submit their ideas on a simple one-page form that asks for a basic project description and some of the details shown here, such as the location, the area of land affected by the project, the current land use and irrigation methods, potential schedule and project duration, an estimate of groundwater demand reduction that the project will achieve if that's known, and if there are any needs for technical assistance. We'll be keeping this call for project concepts open indefinitely, but we do have a deadline of January 7th, 2025 for concepts that can be considered, evaluated for consideration as a pilot project. The open call for project concepts can be found on the East Turlock GSA's MLRP website, and we'll be free to contact us with questions at the email shown below. And I guess at that point, I will pause and see if there are any questions on that.
Chris, this is Savannah. I just wanted to point out that you could use the groundwater accounting platform to create your map and select your APN, but to also estimate demand reduction by figuring out what your total consumed groundwater is per parcel using the platform. So that's one way to help fill out this form, is to use the platform that you have.
And we're happy to, help you fill out the forms. I think you can contact, contact any of us or any of the TAC members or board members. We'll talk to you about it. We'll come out and see you if you want to do that, to help get some of these project ideas refined. And the pilot projects we're excited about because the DOC has indicated that they will allow us to start spending grant money on pilot projects, so we can start early spending of our grant funds for actual projects and not just for plan preparation. So, before the plan's approved, we can start spending money on projects if you qualify for a pilot project.
What, is there gonna be a dollar amount that sets, what is a pilot project versus something else?
At this point, we're not putting that limit on it. I think part of the reason for getting this open call for projects out there is so that we can see what people are thinking about. We'll select based on some criteria that we will have to demonstrate to the DOC that the pilot project is consistent with their grant objectives, but we won't have to have our plan and our selection criteria finalized in a plan before we make that determination. So, bang for the buck certainly is going to be, what we take a hard look at in terms of pilot projects.
Any questions on?
Any questions on MLRP? So this is just one of the programs that we're wanting to develop. Okay, well, I'll turn it over to John and Savannah to talk about the fee calculator.
Okay, thanks, everybody. So East Turlock, Subbasin GSA has rolled out a groundwater accounting platform for growers and landowners to use to understand how your consumed groundwater is being estimated. There's some flyers at the back of the room that are the grower activity sheet that will explain how you can log into the platform, create your user profile, and get access to your water accounts in your parcels. Couple of months ago, when was this, back in May or June, the GSA sent out pieces of mail that have your water account PIN. I'm going to bring up this, this is a copy of the flyer that you all are welcome to grab at the back of the conference room.
I think we got to do stop share and reshare because I'm seeing online as a black screen. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, mine. Thank you. Yeah. And probably do that again for the. Here we go.
Okay. That window will go away.
Yeah, if you just don't touch it, it'll go away in a second. Oh yeah, you can hide controls. There we go. Okay. So for folks who have received your PIN in the mail, many of you may have already visited groundwateraccounting.org/ETSGSA, where you can create your username and password and enter that PIN. For folks who are here today who haven't created your account yet or aren't sure what your PIN is, the project team can help look that up for you. So you can start logging in and see how your water use was accounted for in 2023 and then here in 2024. On the East Turlock Subbasin homepage in the platform, you'll see the 3 steps of creating a user account, entering your PIN to claim those water accounts. You may have more than one PIN. The PINs are sent out to the legal property owner on file with the tax assessor. All parcels that have the same owner name and owner address get one PIN. If there's variations in the owner name, if the properties are owned by different trusts, there's going to be a separate PIN for each of those owner names and owner addresses. But you can group those PINs together once you've entered them into the system, and I'll show you how that works. So this next page of the activity sheet explains what that mailer that you should have received in the mail back in June would look like. The steps to enter your username and password to get logged into the platform, and then how you would enter that PIN. I'll note that this platform is used by other GSAs, notably the Merced Subbasin GSA and the Merced Irrigation and Urban GSA are also using the same platform. So for any landowners or growers who have operations that cross into those GSAs, this is going to serve as a one-stop shop.
The platform is configured separately in each GSA according to the rules and policies that are developed within that GSA, but you'll be able to see all of your water accounts within those GSAs configured according to the unique rules and policies that the GSAs are developed. The timeline for the rollout in those other GSAs is set according to those GSAs, but you may have received pins from Merced Subbasin GSA already and Merced Irrigation and Urban GSA at some point in the future. Once you've entered your pins, you'll be able to see a map of your water accounts and parcels and get into your water dashboard. The water dashboard will provide a list and a map of the parcels that you've registered. It'll provide a button where you can group any accounts together that are allowed to be grouped together according to the rules of the GSA. So if you had different owner names and addresses of record with the tax assessor, but they're controlled by one operation in East Turlock, you would be able to combine those into a single water account. That is done through the request water account changes form, where you would have the opportunity to group any accounts together that again have a shared owner name and address. I wanted to go through this part of the presentation fairly quickly, but I'm happy to hang out after the workshop for anybody who wants to get on the PC with me or the rest of the team, and we can walk you through getting your own account set up if anybody would like some assistance doing that. Then the rest of the handout here has some explanation of how you can see your water budgets and land IQ data, measurements of precipitation, etc. The main focus today is the new functionality that we've added to the platform to look at the impacts of these land IQ
consumed
groundwater estimates on the fees. And so at this point, I will.
Can I point out one thing? If you don't receive surface water, this ET minus effective precipitation is the estimate of consumed groundwater. So if you don't have surface water, you can use this ET minus effective precip chart and all of those numbers to figure out what your consumed groundwater would be for 2023 and for where we're at in 2024. And then that's the number that you're plugging into these fee calculators. So it's a little bit easier if you don't have surface water to estimate.
Is effective precip the same for everybody?
Good question. No, effective precipitation has a cover crop adjustment factor that John can talk about for the fee calculator. I don't believe that's currently being implemented if you are currently cover cropping, because we have to have a way for you to report to us that you are cover cropping, but that's something that'll be coming early in 2025. So just be aware that if you are cover cropping, you get an increase in the amount of effective precipitation that is credited to your account because of those cover cropping practices.
So one other thing, Land IQ provides us with precipitation per field, and they do consider their local met stations that they've deployed, and the fact that, you know, the higher elevation areas will get a little bit more precip out of a storm usually than the lower elevation areas. And then they'll give precip, and then there's a factor for wet years or for all other years. We used to calculate effective precipitation that'll be available for your crops. And then if you're cover cropping, then we have a bonus because usually you'll increase your soil moisture holding capacity by cover cropping. So that'll be baked in. And it's baked into the fee calculator at this point.
And that has to be a seed and cover crop? Like
no, not for our purposes. So, with respect to cover cropping, we could get, it's complicated, right? And we could get real complicated. We thought, let's get to the starting line. Let's keep it real simple. It can be resident vegetation or a seeded cover crop. But because of that, the adjustment factor that we use is 1.2 as opposed to something higher. Now, if we were to use, say, 1.4, which some of the data suggests that, you might increase your effective precip by as much as 1.4, that would require that we be a lot stricter about what kind of cover cropping, when, how is it affecting your soil, and we don't want to get into that stuff, at least at this stage.
What about the nuisance that's gonna be created by all the tumbleweeds? They're gonna come up in some of this fallowed land, that are gonna blow to the downwind neighbor. I mean, you leave just a little strip on the edge of your ranch, sometimes you get tumbleweeds all over. That's kind of a massive problem. Not to mention the rodents that are gonna be produced.
Possibly rodents, possibly tumbleweeds could be a nuisance, and that's something that, you know, as we develop policies that we're gonna have to look at to make sure that we're not creating more.
I mean, I know on my little ranch, I've got an upwind neighbor that very seldom does anything to there, and the amount of weed seed that blows into my place that I have to deal with in terms of higher herbicide costs. Hey, that's a lot. And we're gonna suddenly have all these all over the place around here. It's gonna be a big deal for the people who are still able to farm. You know, create a huge nuisance by this. Now, the state doesn't care. They don't care about this. It's gonna be rough.
So we've got a number of people looking at it, and I think that's a good point. That's one of the things that we're gonna have to look at. We don't want to create a nuisance by our policies.
I do want to make sure that we get through this demo, so that way we save some time at the end for helping folks. So it looks like you're all set, John. Keep going here.
Okay. So here I am logged into groundwateraccounting.org. We have a couple of water accounts configured with one of the local growers who's given us permission to share their data today. I can click through to the account number to get to the water budget page for the account. So when you're logged in, you will see any of the accounts for which you've entered a PIN will show up on that homepage, and you can navigate to those accounts. For this example, we have a grower with 2 accounts that I've labeled as sample account 1 and sample account 2. We're not going to get into all of the details of how to use the platform today. I just wanted to point out that the fee calculator functionality is available from your water account. You can click into the fee calculator, and you'll be taken to a view here that shows, again, confirming you're on the right water account, that you can see and understand the parcels that are included. You can switch to any of the water accounts that you've entered a PIN for.
John, what you're showing is not in this, is it?
I'm sorry. Yes, the fee calculator is not in the activity sheet. The activity, yeah, I apologize for that, but the activity sheet kind of ends. This fee calculator, we finished building it just in the past couple of days, and I wasn't able to get it into the activity sheet. That's correct. Okay. We can choose the reporting period that we're going to use to estimate the fees. We have a full record of 2023 data from Land IQ that we've brought into the platform. And then we have the data from 2024 up until the end of September. The 2024 reporting period runs through the end of October, so it's essentially complete with the October data missing. But you can choose whether you want to look at the 2023 or 2024 data for the estimated fees. And then Ryan explained the different phases of the fee structures that include when Category 3 charges kick in. You can look at the phase 1 or the phase 2 fees. We've not yet implemented the phase 3 fees in the calculator. For any folks who are receiving surface water, you can choose to enter an estimate of that surface water delivery into the calculator so that that can be taken into account. You'll be required to enter an efficiency rate for the delivery in your that surface water for irrigation. To keep it simple, I'm going to start without entering any of the surface water components. The next section of the calculator is where we can start to explore these MLRP options or other fallowing options. I'm going to come back to this section. I want to just take a look at the fee and usage calculations for the baseline first. So we scroll down into section 3 of the tool here.
I go to phase 1.
Excuse me.
Do you want to start on phase 1?
I kind of prefer
phase.
Yeah. So here on the left, we see the total groundwater pumping fees for this operation, which is 742 parcel acres. 700 of those acres are irrigated. So the 742 acres is the amount of land that is receiving an allocation. The 700 acres is the amount of land for which Land IQ evapotranspiration data is being calculated. So the average consumed groundwater, we're reporting that to you both on a per parcel acre basis and a per irrigated acre basis, so that you can understand the difference between the land that's receiving the allocation versus the land that is irrigated. Then we can see the total volume of allocation is that 1,187 acre feet that are allocated, and that corresponds to that 1.6 acre feet per acre. That's the the category 3 threshold of water use. The total ET and the total precipitation that are being measured from Land IQ for those irrigated lands are reported. If you'd entered any surface water, we would see that here. And that results in a total groundwater consumption of 1,564 for this baseline scenario. If I click here into the fee structure report, here's where we start to see how the category 0, 1, 2, and 3 fees are being applied. Right now, we're just focusing on this left side, this baseline scenario, where we can see category 0, that first 6 inches or half a foot of water has been fully used. We used all of the available water in category 0. Category 1 has 445 acre feet available. That's the 0.5 to 1.1 feet of usage, and we've used all of the water in category 1. And then we've used all of the water in category 3, and we've begun using water in category 3 at that higher charge rate for the phase 2 category 3 cost. So we can see that we're kind of getting into that category 3 higher cost water, and that is driving the total fee for this operation. So next, what I want to demonstrate is if we come into the MLRP and fallowing options, we start to see the MLRP opportunities that Chris explained to us, as well as the self-directed fallowing or cover cropping options, and then also the separate land fallowing program. For each of these options that you as a grower or landowner can explore, the tool will report if I were to elect to take one of these actions, do I get to keep my allocation, and am I eligible to receive an incentive payment? For the grower self-directed options, you do keep your allocation, but there's no incentive provided by the GSA. You'll see in the fee calculator, there are question mark icons that you can click to learn a little bit more about any of these terms. For the incentive payment, this explains that these are preliminary estimates of the incentive and that they're subject to change, but this is put in front of you so you can start to explore and understand how these incentive options could influence the decisions you have to make as a landowner and a grower. Similarly here for the acres option, we're explaining how you can go about entering acres that might be included in any of these options. So to start, I'm going to enter one category at a time just so we can go and see the effects of that one option. You're also able to mix and match, but we'll save the mix and matching for the end. So recall we were looking at a 700 irrigated acres. So let's explore what would happen if we put 250 of those 700 acres into a self-directed land fallowing option. So in this case, you're going to keep the allocation for these 250 acres, and there will be no incentive payment. I can scroll down here and look at the summary and see that I've changed my total water use fee from that nearly $200,000 under the baseline scenario to $50,000 for a total savings of $144,000, almost $145,000. Now, looking at the fee structure report is where we can see what we've done is we've driven the 377 acre feet that was in category 3. We've removed any category 3 water. And now we're only using the category 2 water, and we're using about half of that category 2 water. So if your goal as a grower was to avoid in this phase 2 fee structure paying for this highest cost water, you'd see that you've achieved that. And in fact, you've driven down some of that category 2 water. And you can go back and adjust your numbers. If your goal was to get entirely out of the category 2 water and only use your category 0 and 1, you could explore that. if you wanted to use more of that category 2 water, you can kind of tune those numbers to understand the impacts on your potential fees for each of these buckets. There was some questions earlier about how the charges apply, like if they stack. And the goal with this table is to help understand that you are only paying, the category 2 charge for the proportion of the water that is in category 2. It's not additive to those previous categories. Okay. So
I've got a question.
Yeah, please.
All this stuff is great that you're going through. I can't see it from here anyway. Why don't you just tell us, what is it going to cost us to pump 42 inches of water for almonds and walnuts per acre? And then we can figure it out ourselves after that. I mean, all this calculations you're doing is, hey, it's, who can understand it? Maybe you can, but I can't. If we know how much we're going to pay to pump a certain amount of water per acre on our parcel, then we can figure out whether or not we need to abandon everything and grow tumbleweeds. Because that's, I think, and not only that, we can pump as much water as we want, as long as we pay for it. So in that case, there is no shortage of water.
Yeah.
It's a money grab by whoever's in charge here. And that's what it's amounting to. I was at a previous meeting here and I said something about we should have went after groundwater or surface water. I said, well, that's talking to the choir there, but we're not solving anything. The problem is we need to bring in more water from outside sources to alleviate the problem here. Eliminating agricultural production in this valley, that's not progress. That's going backwards.
Yeah. Joe, we didn't write the law.
I know we didn't write the law.
We didn't write
We're
the
getting
law.
screwed by that law, aren't we?
Well, go complain to Sacramento about that. All we're doing was we got a mandate, okay, to balance the groundwater. In 20 years, that's what we got.
The problem is, board, is we do so much going along to get along, and it's gotten us nowhere. I mean, we're just getting pushed out, basically.
Well, you got two options. You can go by the rules that we're trying to do here, or you can have the state come down and shove something right down your throat. I mean, and we're all going to be out of business.
Well, you don't think the state's already
the state already wants us all out of business, Ward. Don't be naive. They love nothing more to put solar panels all over this place, and they don't care about what happens to us as farmers.
Yeah, thank you. No, we appreciate your line of thinking, okay?
No.
And it isn't that we don't have this room, but it feels the same way you do.
You're making us the endangered species here.
Well,
Yeah, so let me just maybe say a couple of things, and it's not gonna help. But I think we're not making progress from the agricultural economy viewpoint. From a groundwater sustainability viewpoint, yes, we'll be making progress, but it's at the expense of your operations. And so, as we've laid it out, what we're putting forward is our attempt to come to a framework that helps soften the blow and nothing more. It's not a solution. You're right. The solution would be if we could bring in enough surface water to help offset it. And so, what we're doing is, as a GSA, we're acting within what we can do in terms of coordinating with TID, with MID to try to maximize that. But right now there's a limit. There might be possibilities to do more. But that's kind of pie in the sky at this point. But those are conversations that are those are the game changer conversations that do need to happen. It's just that there's no silver bullets right now that will really help us to avoid that situation.
So this fee structure that's proposed where you can have a protest against it and all that, what's the purpose of just not doing the protest? Is it so that we screw ourselves versus the state screwing us worse? Is that what I'm getting at?
That's one way to look at it. Is that, you know, what we're trying to avoid, you know, so look at, where we have limitations of our basin, we have limited surface water, so we're trying to correct that deficiency. But we wouldn't be here having the conversation this way if it wasn't for the fact that the law had been passed and that the state was hanging intervention over our heads.
If I'm following you right, this Prop 218,
Yes.
that's what made the government theft of our water rights legal.
No, it's Sigma that.
Well, that came from 218, right?
No, 218 is the process that's been adopted for, you know, that you have to go through in order to justify collecting.
Where did Sigma come from originally? State, defense?
State.
The state.
2014.
I've heard conflicting things. That's what
No, it was a state, it was a state law. State law passed in 2014.
And it was really driven by, you know, our neighbors to the south where we were voting on, or was that just a serious subsidence and other
State senators and state
right?
I do think we want to make sure that we have time to get through this. So I think, John, maybe we can show another example where we can show the incentive payments. So
Absolutely.
there are opportunities to engage in the MLRP program.
And I
Maybe just answer one more question, which is that we are very willing to sit down one-on-one to walk you through the fee calculator or the simple, you know, calculus of what works for you, okay? To help you better understand how this is going to hit you. And whether we use the fee calculator or whether we just sit down and do some numbers so that you can go back and work your own numbers. We want you to understand this so that you know what you're either protesting or not protesting and how it's going to hit you.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a balance. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing is that we are losing like 4.3 acres per minute in this country, and and all the ag lands going away. And so 1% is feeding 100%. Pretty soon we're going to be down to nothing, and what are people going to eat? They don't realize, this country does not realize, I've never starved. So they don't realize the importance of agriculture whatsoever. They think they can go to the store and get whatever they want, import it. Here they put all these regulations on us, food safety and all this, and they go out and buy it from another country that's using DDT and everything else. But the thing is that with these fees and different things, it's going to put a lot of people out of business. And we're looking at housing's going wild in this valley. And we got a Mediterranean climate. We're losing that prime land, and there's not that many areas like this in the world. And people don't care. It's all about money. Everything's about money. This is about money. And so with the loss, and the thing is, this happened in LA. Okay, Mulholland was bringing in waters from the Olin Valley and supplying LA so that they could grow and develop. Well, look what it is now. It's no ag, practically. It's all houses. We see that happening here. And you're leading us right into it, putting us all out of business with all this plan here. And the pretty soon there's not going to be anything left. And when it's all paved over, how are you going to do? And you're stuck.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be importing food, one way to get taken over the country, so the country stop giving you food, you're going to buckle down on your knees and say, "Okay, take me."
Yeah.
No, I agree.
And it's almost a national security issue if you don't know your own.
Yeah. No, I think it's.
Agree with you.
Yeah.
The problem is all the state senators and state assemblymen that haven't considered or never did consider the points you guys are making. Okay. Yeah. What I would argue for is that all of California, not just this local area, ought to be helping us pay for this. What's going to happen here? Okay. It shouldn't come out of our budget, but that isn't the case.
Well, then they're charging us.
Well, they're effectively gonna put us out of business.
Anyway,
You can't pay that.
what we have is the best plan of this point, the best plan we can. We got to get the balance, we gotta, in 20 years, we gotta take out 21,000 acres in this area that's using water. That's what it amounts to. Okay, some of that's gonna come from our just natural taking out of orchards and leaving them out instead of planting them right back. We're gonna leave them out 2 or 3, 4 years, whatever that means. Some of it will come from getting paid, like what they want to show us right now, getting paid for these other programs. Okay,
Yeah,
but it's gonna be a combination of things that ends up happening.
What we need to do more is get all these legislators educated as far as what they're doing to the states. And educate them and show them and send them to another country that's going through this whole thing. Or with countries that have starved before and realize the value of agriculture and tell them, hey, this is gonna happen to us. You better get with it. Wake up.
Hey, there's no oranges left in Orange County.
They gotta take and go.
Remember, you guys, when did the rest of the western states in this country adjudicate and take care of all of their groundwater issues? Okay, California never did it until 2014. The rest of the states did it 100 or 150 years ago.
Right.
And what's happened is that now Californians, that's us, are having to deal with it right now. And so it's affecting this generation instead of 4 or 5 generations.
Guys, can we pause on this? Because we only have 20 minutes left on the Zoom meeting. And so we really need to get through this demo in order to make sure that the people online can see this. And then I think we can pick this conversation back up. But just from a time process check. No, we don't have time.
Why did they stop the housing? Stop the housing.
Okay, so we looked at a fallowing option and saw how that proportionally reduces the amount of irrigation occurring in order to drive down that more expensive category 3 water. The reason the calculator is tailored to particular parcels and growers rather than just giving a simple number is because every grower's circumstances are different. How much of your parcel are you irrigating is a key factor here. If you have a big parcel, but for whatever reason, portions of it aren't irrigated, you're getting allocations for that. And that gives you a degree of flexibility that this calculator can help you understand. Whereas if you're irrigating 100% of your parcel boundaries, then your allocation and your irrigated areas are the same, and your unique circumstances would be reflected here. So I think there was some really good discussion and good points that were made there, that we've tried to strike a balance between making this simple versus making it relevant to your specific circumstances. And that's why it's not just a single number. Here's what it's going to cost you for 42 acres. It's looking at your circumstances to help you understand the impacts to you as an individual grower or landowner. So we looked at a self-directed fallowing scenario. Let's zero that out and let's look at one of the MLRP options. We could look at a recharge option where we're looking at opportunities to bring more surface water into the basin. Maybe let's do something a little bit smaller there. Let's put 50 acres into a floodplain connection spreading and recharge project. Again, we can click the question mark to understand a little bit more about what this land repurposing option means. We can see the incentive that would be provided for repurposing this 50 acres. And then we can understand that we're going to lose the allocation as a trade-off for receiving that payment.
How much is it per acre according to that right there?
The preliminary number here is $1,030 per acre per year for participation in the floodplain reconnection, spreading and recharge option.
Yeah, that would be
So I can scroll down here and see that the total usage fee has dropped a little bit because we're no longer irrigating those 50 acres that we've put into the MLRP program. We can see that the total acres for allocation was the full 742 parcel acres. Now that is less the 50 acres that we've enrolled in the MLRP program. And the irrigated acres have also gone down by that 50 acres that we've put in the MLRP program. So we've got, in this case, a small fee reduction, but we're also receiving an annual MLRP incentive payment. Then we can go in here and see that we're still using that category 3 bucket because the lands that aren't in the MLRP program are still being irrigated and utilizing that category 3 water. So then we might want to go and mix and match a little bit and say, what if I put 50 acres in the MLRP to receive some incentive payment, but I'm going to do some self-directed rotational fallowing, those orchards that are towards the end of their life, maybe we would slow down the rate at which we replant those, put 100 acres into that self-directed fallowing, and come down and look at the impacts. And here I've not completely reduced my category 3 water, but I have reduced it quite a bit. So 100 acres of fallowing was not enough to completely get out of category 3, but it was enough to cut the total fee close to in half, plus receive an annual incentive payment. And you could then go back and explore, different numbers for fallowing, cover cropping.
I guess, what was the total acreage of this theoretical example?
Yeah, and this is actually a real world example with real land IQ data. We've just anonymized the parcel name. Yeah, it's a 742 acre set of parcels. 700 acres are irrigated out of that 742.
They have to fallow 100 acres.
If they wanted to get out of category 3, yeah, it's more, it looks like it's going to be more, we need to play with the numbers here, but it looks like it might be more like 150 acres. That gets us fully or almost fully out of the category 3 water. So 150 acres was enough to drive down that category 3 usage and get us into that.
If they have cover crop in between the rows.
So then we can actually add the cover cropping acres.
500.
And what would you consider that to be, half the amount of the total land, or what percent?
No, if you're doing cover cropping in between tree rows, that counts for acre for a full acre.
I see.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yep.
So if it's 700 and you put in, you cover crop in between all of those, then you get 700.
It applies to the whole acreage where you employ the practice.
So the impacts of cover cropping are a little bit different than the MLRP or the fallowing. The cover cropping adjusts the amount of effective precipitation that you get credit for. So in order to make that more obvious, I'm going to zero out the non-cover cropped options here. And let's just say we were to cover crop the full 700 acres of irrigated lands. What I would see here is a difference in the total annual consumed groundwater about 100 acre feet that we get from the cover cropping scenario.
You're calculating that you're using less water with a cover crop?
Yes.
Wouldn't that use more water?
It has more ET, but you put more water into soil storage, and that's a greater amount.
Okay.
That's what the research shows. Research shows that it's 40% conservatively.
You're evapotranspirating more in the summer with the cover crop, but you're capturing more of the rain in the wet season.
Yeah, and we're not going to tell people how to cover crop. If they want to terminate their cover crop after the springtime, that's up to them. But what the research shows is that if you measure runoff, you don't get runoff from cover cropped areas. You get them from bare soil areas. You get it from bare soil areas.
If there are places you're going to get runoff is up in the hills. You don't get it on the flat ground down here.
Okay.
Not much.
Yeah, fair enough. Anyways, so that's why we have an adjustment factor, because the research allows us to adopt one.
Is there anything about like an annual crop, cover crop in the winter? Is there any,
I think if you click on the cover cropping, there's a definition of cover cropping that the GSA has created, and we covered it in our rules and regs committee, and it'll be out in the rules and regulations draft document. So I would encourage folks who have questions about this to come talk to us afterwards, but it's a pretty broad definition meant to support people who are following these practices.
Yeah, it's got to be for 5 consecutive months during the winter season.
So
that's our current definition
now for it to be effective for 2025. Let's start the charge, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yes, Tim.
It doesn't have to be a planted cover crop.
Does not have to be planted. It can be resident.
Natural weeds.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And in terms of, the rules for how we apply it under the MLRP program, those will address nuisance. So, and they will address things like that if you want to qualify for MLRP, then it has to be some kind of a cover crop that provides a benefit, like a pollinator seed mix or something like that.
Hey, Mike, you
Yes,
said
sir.
on the cover crop, it's 5 months during the winter time,
Yes,
and then the idea is chop it down and burn it down before IQ starts reporting.
we're not gonna tell people what to do with it. If they want to do that with it, that's fine. If they don't, then, but during that winter time, the ET from a cover crop is not much more than the ET from bare soil. But you get the benefit from breaking up the soil, adding carbon, adding to the soil moisture storage capacity and so forth. So that's where we're coming from. But we're using a modest multiplier because we're not going to tell people how to do it or how long to leave it in.
Okay. So we looked at the how cover cropping results in a lower estimate of consumed groundwater per the science and policies that the GSA has looked at. We could now explore mix and matching the cover cropping with some self-directed fallowing and maybe finding an opportunity for a recharge basin. And you'll see with some creative combination of options, we're just barely into the category 3 water here. A little bit more fallowing would drive us fully out of that category 3. And then again, going to the summary tab, we can see the the total reduction in fees and incentives and the total fee that would actually be charged in this example. So, the initially we're starting to look at a number and $1 per acre foot that
planted here, this guy?
Excuse me?
What's planted here? The trees?
Almonds.
Almonds?
And they're like right on the average, about 2.3 acre feet per acre of consumed groundwater being used.
Is that after the precipitation credit?
Consumed.
Yep.
2.3 is gonna pay for it, is that?
Yeah, 2.3. So if you look on the fee calculation, the baseline scenario, that'll just tell you straight up what's happening in your account right now, and then what the fees are if nothing changed. And then the land use changes will give you a chance to kind of play with what you might want to try to do for 2025.
What's his fee?
Doing nothing is 196, 491, so just shy of 200,000. But this is given the category 3 phase 2, so that would be 2026.
How much an acre?
Per parcel acre, 265.
$265 an acre.
Yeah.
Is that 2.3, excuse me, that 2.3 averaged over how many years?
So that's just for 2023, right? That was the 2023 data was roughly 2.2 acre feet per acre per almond orchard acre.
We have longer data for that?
Our data for we have 2023 and 2024. I mean, we have data that goes back another 10, 15 years, but we haven't analyzed it or uploaded it here. We felt like, okay, let's give folks 2023 and 2024 so they can see the actuals for their operation. If you want it boiled down into something more simple, if you don't need this calculator, then, contact us and we'll walk you through it.
The problem is 2023 and 2024 are pretty wet years. You got to average that data with some drought years, or that's going to be way off.
It's going to be different. You're right.
Yeah, it's going to be different. Now, is the 2023, did that qualify for the wet year rate or the dry or the normal year rate?
2023 wetter than 20.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a threshold in the formula.
Yeah, we haven't applied that in the platform.
Okay, so you just applied the 0.7. Okay, all right.
I want to explain that the wetter the year gets, the multiplier gets smaller, so the difference isn't as great.
Yeah, it's just talking about effective precipitation.
Yeah, so effective precipitation is what's held in the soil and can be used by your crops, right? So when it rains real hard, you're going to get more percolation and runoff, so your effective precipitation multiplier is actually less. So for wet years in our area, we calculated it out at about 0.55. And for normal and dry years, we calculated it out at about 0.71. So it tends to equalize, and the soil can only hold so much, right? So, it is more water available during wet years, even with the 0.55 multiplier. The maximum that we think you can get out of precipitation is probably about a foot.
What did you say the total amount that he's gonna have to pay on that there, and what was the average acre split per acre?
Yeah, we're looking at 2024 now, and under the baseline is $250,000 approximately, and that corresponds to $350 per irrigated acre for 2024. The volumes were less in 2023.
That was with him not irrigating 100 acres. Right?
No, that's I'm talking about the baseline scenario with the data that we've entered, which was 100 acres of self-directed fallowing, cover cropping 500 acres, and then putting 50 acres into floodplain reconnection and recharge. We were able to cut the usage fee in half, and then that's that 125,000 with those MLRP and fallowing options, plus a $50,000 incentive from the MLRP program.
What would it be if you didn't have those incentives?
If you didn't have the incentive payments?
Yeah, we can take the incentive payment out, and you just want to look at the fallowing and cover cropping.
No, get rid of that too.
If you get rid of everything, that's this baseline scenario. That's the numbers on this.
What's the per acre on that?
The $350 per irrigated acre, according to the 2024 number.
Yeah, and that's because the usage per orchard acre went up from 2.2 to 2.47. Yes. So it was more irrigation 2024 than in 2023.
I think maybe one helpful thing to keep in mind is these acre foot per acre is the average over your entire account. So if you've got walnuts and almonds, what it's doing is it's taking the total consumed groundwater from all the fields in your account and calculating an average. So what you could do is you could start to look at per parcel. Like I think somebody mentioned they've got walnuts that are ready to come out. You could go look at what that specific parcel has in terms of water usage. And if you followed that, you could get a better sense of what the real water savings would be from that particular ranch.
Yeah, but what you're not telling us, and I wish you'd give a number, never mind what you took out of production and all this, how much are we going to have to pay to pump 3 feet of water per acre that's producing? And never mind what you're fallowing or what you're in recharge, you get credit for. Hey, when you're fallowing, you're not making any money on that ground.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's a lot, because before you were making money on that.
Brian, do you remember what the weighted average is?
That into the total.
I don't.
Okay, I'm like to do that.
Weighted average for what?
Well,
conversion from applied to, so our rough multiplier to go from applied, it's going to vary by operation, but our rough regional one is 0.76. So we'd have 36 inches times 0.76, would give us 27 inches. I mean, we'd have to calculate it out. We did that for some of those other examples.
Yeah, I think maybe it's something that we can talk about it offline. I just want to make sure.
Well, I mean, what we need to do is we need to take this simple scenario and get it out to everybody. I think that's what I would propose. I'm sorry.
Maybe to help what these guys are talking about, is there a way just to make a Joe farmer, he's got 100 acres of almonds, say, he wants to pump 3 acre feet of water, and then plug in an average precipitation and maybe come up with something right now? Answer these guys' questions.
Why don't we stop sharing and then you can pull up the Excel template that we have that we could make that up.
Okay.
So why don't we stop sharing real quick?
All right, so figure 100 acre parcel, okay, figure 95, let's say 95 acres of it is planted. You've got 5 acres in support and you've got a resident sitting in there. So 95 acres times 27 inches gives us what by way of a fee?
I'm gonna grow it on 27 inches.
What's this?
Well, I know you're going to grow it on 36 inches. And 36 times 0.76 is 27. That you're going from pumped to consumed. Because that's where what our fees tied to is that ET.
I did an option to hide the.
Oh, you hit something. Sorry, we did some black magic that.
They turned a meeting.
Oh, great, thank
There
you.
it is.
Okay. Okay, we've got some questions in the chat. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing real quick so that I can pull up our.
Well, they're working on that. There's been discussion about carryover.
Yes.
Based on wet years, based on taking out a field, based on replanting and young trees not doing as much water.
Yes.
There's going to be a carryover.
We're gonna be working through credits in the first quarter of next year. The credits that are on the table is carryover and taking that carryover and applying it to the field where it happened or transferring it somewhere else. So that is on the table. The other thing that's on the table is promoting recharge. So if you have a recharge basin, how much of that should be a credit? Let's see. I mean, those are the two primary credits is the recharge credit and the carryover credit, and both of those are on the table.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's very important for everybody just to help everybody survive. Because we're gonna have years where they're not, maybe not, I mean, they might be completely out of planning, when they're not want to lose that. I mean, that might help them survive to carry on.
Exactly, and that carryover, you know, that would accrue to your account. And then after a certain number of years, it would start to decrease, right? So let's say that you had 100 acre feet of carryover for your operation. If you use it next year, then use the whole amount. If you wait longer to use it, then over time it would decrease. And then we are talking about transfers to where you can take that credit. And let's say that you created that credit by taking, a field out of production. You didn't use your whole allocation. There's a credit from that you could potentially transfer to another field.
One parcel, 100 acres.
So that just allows you more flexibility. And I apologize for it being complicated, but what we're trying to do is kind of hit the balance between making sure that we give folks flexibility and just making it workable.
To transfer that credit, would they have to be adjacent to each other, or how's it work?
Yeah.
So we haven't worked out the rules yet. There are different management zones that we're establishing. So we're going to have rules about if you want to go from one management zone to the other. But the current discussions have been around that if you're within the both parcels are within the management zone, that we don't care if you're adjacent or if you're a couple of miles away.
What about ownership?
I'm sorry?
Ownership.
And ownership, so if you are pooling, so basically you've got an agreement, let's say that either it's under the same ownership or you have a lease agreement, then you can pool and manage it as one operation. For transfers, we want to, what we're recommending to the board is that we allow transfers from one owner to another. The reason being that the small landowners are at a disadvantage if they can't do that. But if they can transfer or receive a transfer between agreeable owners as a trade or by whatever deal you agree to, then that gives them the same flexibility as if you're pooling a larger operation. Does that make sense?
Okay, we're gonna pop this guy up, and I went the wrong way on zooming. Oh, what have I done?
With the calculator,
Huh?
so you can add and subtract all the different things on there, but how do you actually make that like realize? Like, do we have to tell you guys what we're doing and how many acres of what, and then you guys will plug it in on the back end, or how do we report that so that way we actually get the credits?
So those are the rules that we're working on. I'm just going to point out, you realize you're not plugged in right now, Savannah.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
For anything that you implement yourself, like let's say that you're fallowing a field, then you self-report that field is fallowed and you won't be charge the ET for that field.
In the calculator or in what?
That'll be in the groundwater accounting platform.
You need to report that in the groundwater accounting platform. And then once you report it, I mean, we may look at it to verify, but that's self-reporting. For any of the incentive payments, we need to talk about what your intent is and enter into an agreement for it. So there'll be, we'll try to keep those agreements as simple as possible. But, your project could be putting in a 20-acre basin so that you can retain more water that you take off of the Highline Canal, or that sort of thing. And that you might spend more time, if you need our help in terms of, design and figuring out what's optimal for you, then we'd be available to help you with that. Or we'd sit with your, with your consultant to get that in place.
Okay, just to share what's on the screen, this was a precursor to.
Enlarge it a little bit.
Well, you can, but then you kind of lose.
Yeah, but they kind of can't see any of it.
Okay, let's see if we can.
You lose, you gain.
Here we go. Okay, can folks see this better?
No, the numbers are still, and my eyes aren't great, but I don't think the numbers are visible. Probably behind the third row here.
That's a little better.
Is it getting better?
Better.
Or Zoom. Okay, we'll look. Okay, so what we did is we just made up a fake parcel that we set as 100 acres. That's 100 irrigated acres. Put the total ET at 300 acre feet. So that would be 3 feet of water. Gave a little precip here to add, so we would need to account for that. Now what we can see is,
one of the things that has come out of this thing is that that 3 foot of water which is maybe what we generally think as what we're using, isn't what the land IQ guys say that we're using. Isn't that right? That's where that 2.3 came out of?
That's
yes.
right.
Yep. So
use what land IQ is gonna have most of us are gonna be at that 2.3, 2.2 to 2.4 acre feet per year. I wouldn't use the 300 if you.
Well, so this is just total ET, and then what we would be calculating is this average consumed groundwater. So the total ET is taking this minus total precip, and it should get to effective precip. So I'll just get this down to about, I'm making up some numbers here for an example. Okay, so let's say this is just our average consumed groundwater, which is for almonds, 2.3 acre feet per acre here. So that would give us, we have a total allocation of 1.6 acre feet per acre per parcel acre, total allocation of 160. So this is where you get to your estimated fees. So if you were totally average across the board, your consumed groundwater was that 2.3 on this 100 acre parcel, you'd be looking at a total bill of about $32,000. And then what that comes out to is like roughly $145, call it, per acre foot. And then it's about $330 per acre.
Now that's in a wet year, right? Because you're figuring that you've got 100 acre feet of effective precip?
No, I just messed with the numbers up here to get to average consumed groundwater of 2.3 acre feet. So, I mean, this is kind of up here is kind of a wash. I'd say we're just trying to get to what is this average consumed groundwater in order to provide an example of what the fees look like.
So it's basically telling you that if you have 100 acre parcels with wall-to-wall orchard, that you're looking at 300 plus an acre for as an additional hit against your yield and your income for that acre.
Can you manipulate that to the 2.47 that you have for the 24 year?
Maybe not 2.47 exactly, but I can try to get to. Okay, that was pretty close.
0.41, so that went up to about $360 an acre for those that didn't see.
80.
Thanks, guys. Okay, 75. I got a little Price is Right rules. Okay, so here's 2.48 for you.
That brings us up to 384 per acre. Now, why don't you decrease the planted acreage to 90?
Yeah, so this is basically what the fee calculator will do for you.
So that's great for you guys, but how do we be able to do that for like ourselves?
So that's what the fee calculator is doing. So this.
Online portal, it shows up almost automatically. It's super easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're happy to help you figure that out and we can bookmark it for you and all that good stuff. But this, I think, was the precursor to building it in the platform for everybody as we worked with our ad hoc committee to create these spreadsheets to give them a sense of what we were doing. And then they found it so valuable that the GSA opted to build the calculator. But this is just a way to quickly get at this hypothetical scenario that we were talking about of average almond consumption on a 100-acre parcel. This is what you're looking at for fees. This is a general per acre.
And that's in the phase 2, I think it was.
That's in phase 2, yeah.
So I'll go ahead and stop sharing. I think we have time.
Do we have a couple of questions online?
Don't have question. Well, we just think some of the general shared sentiments that there's a lot of unintended consequences of.
Well, that's a public meeting. Let's hear them.
Oh, it's just what one person had a concern that the state will see the fee structure as a way to invoke a state surcharge. In my opinion, this will be used to fund the program. They did this with Coupa hazmat program. They begin to issue surcharges to each business in jurisdiction. Might not happen immediately, but the door is open now. So I think there's some general concerns about state intervention. But are there any questions in the room about the fee calculator generally or the fee as proposed or the fee structure? And then we'll be here to help people do their individual accounts afterwards.
You know, at $300 an acre, 90,000 acres, I think that's brings in about $27 million. What are you going to do with all this money?
Do we want to speak to the programs that are being funded?
So I don't think we've ever projected an income of 27 million.
$300 an acre.
Well, it's gonna vary. I mean, that's probably why we have these scenarios that we're playing out here, because it's gonna vary, you know, based on.
If you take half the land out of production, you still got 13.5 million. You think half the land's gonna come out of production?
Yeah, so our projected income based on the fees that we've got is roughly 10.1 million for the first 3 years. And we use that to build a fund to equalize the other years. And roughly 7.8 million in the following year, but it's going to go up and down one way or the other. That's aligned with how much we think we can collect for category 1 and category 2 if we follow our plan, right? And any pumping above the allocation is not in our plan. So those category 3 charges are what's going to hit hard and what folks are going to find difficult to live with. And I have to admit that, you know, to some extent, that's really by design. If we, beyond an implementation fund that we have of a few $1 million to help us deal with the ups and downs, find that we have a surplus, then we're obligated to decrease our fees. We don't have to charge the maximum. And we need a fund because we don't know what project opportunities are going to come up and how many people are going to be interested in incentives. You know, if almond prices are real good, a lot of folks probably aren't going to be that interested and they're going to be willing to pay. But if almond prices are lousy, then more folks might be interested, or they might.
About funding some of these incentives with the fee that we're paying, right? Or is that coming from the grant?
Yes.
Well, if
they're going to come from the fees that we were talking about.
Okay, well then why raise the fees to the point where people can't even farm just to offer programs that are a solution to the problem of grading? It's insane.
Well, what we're trying to do with the fee calculator is to bring it out to you and get exactly those kinds of directions. And if the majority of growers tell us that it's insane and this doesn't work for us, then we need to retool and do something different.
You're talking about creating farmer welfare, but we're paying for it out of our own pockets. Doesn't make sense.
Well, the other option is we don't do that. And then what we come up with is we tell you, here's how much groundwater you can pump, figure it out. And the unfortunate result of that is that you're gonna have the same or more reduction, but you're probably gonna get it by farmers walking away from their operations. So what we're hoping to do is not to have that happen. So, you know, that it would. So a good analogy is chemotherapy, right? We're trying to cure the cancer without killing the patient.
Well, what's gonna happen is a lot of the smaller farmers are gonna be forced out with this water pricing structure that you guys had. And the larger guys might be able to absorb that to an extent, and you're driving the small farmers up. You know, maybe that's by design. Maybe they contribute to political campaigns, the larger guys.
Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons that we want to be able to institute transfers, so that, you know, you can get the same benefit as from larger land holdings. But, yeah, I mean, we're focusing outreach to smaller farmers just to get perspective on what'll work for them. I mean, we want to make this workable for everyone and not put people's backs against a wall where they have very few choices left.
What was that total irrigated acreage across the GSA?
Total irrigated acreage, and of course, it's going to vary from year to year, but it's just under 90,000 acres. It's about 87,000 acres, and about 60% of that's in almonds.
I think it is 11:15. I think maybe we need to stop our Zoom meeting and then we can continue to help people in the room. Is that?
Well, we would need to adjourn the meeting. Are we ready to do that, or are we still having public comment? Because these are important things that need to be said publicly.
Sorry, Mike, and that 87,000, was that including the additional 10,000 acres that are going to be brought in, or is that number the total 87?
We're basing our fee on 87. Yeah. Yes, sir.
If farmer transfers to another farmer, will they be able to charge for that amount, or what's the?
That's between you and who you transfer to. So it's a private transaction. Okay. So, you know, I know that ESA has a module that they can add to the groundwater accounting platform that allows you to make those kinds of transfers. We haven't worked on it yet, but our hope is that we can make it easy, almost like a Craigslist kind of a transaction.
Available next year, you think, or 25, or?
It depends on what the GSA determines as rules and regs, and then once we have rules and regulations, we can build features and.
Yeah, I would envision that would be next year.
It needs to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure it is. Needs to be. That's where our stuff will plan.
Yeah. So the intention was to have everything online that we're going to adopt for this first go around.
Well, if there's no other comments or questions, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting.
And I just want to, you know, tell you that we're open to spending time with you to, you know, either number one, hear you out regarding your concerns. Number two, spend time with you so that you can better understand the implications and make decisions. And, you know, or we can talk to somebody that you trust so that, you know, they can talk to you if you're sick of us and don't want to talk to us.
I mean, there's a lot more concerns. This is going to put most of us. It's going to put most of us a good percentage of business. That's all there is to it.
Well, this system was thought out and planned to try to make sure that everybody, all the farmers in this thing shared the pain equally, okay? That's all we've done, Dan. That's the whole, we tried to be as transparent as we could. We tried to make sure that everybody shared the pain equally. And it's not perfect, I know, in that regard, but that's what the objective was. And, nobody is enjoying doing this.
No.
We're not trying to put anybody out of business, but we were mandated this problem. And this is the best way we think we can deal with it. It's not perfect, we know that.
Unfortunately, I don't think locally we can solve the problem. The problem is statewide. As far as this groundwater thing. But yet, we're letting billions of gallons of water run to the ocean. For what purpose?
It's a great point, Joe. We're not arguing that point at all.
And that's the part that gets me.
Sure, it's terrible. We're selling for all that stuff.
When there's people starving in this world, and we don't care about whether or not we're producing enough food or we do as farmers.
That's a whole other subject. You guys are right, but it's a whole other subject.
I do maybe make a quick plug for the Rules and Regs Ad Hoc Committee. So if you're interested in joining the conversation, providing feedback on credits and transfers and those sort of next steps, we'd be happy to have you. You can come find me and I'll add you to our email list. And you can engage in those conversations. They're on Mondays and they're virtual.
Ward, do you need to officially close the meeting? Because
I did it.
Okay, so you can adjourn. You don't need a second.
I can.
Okay.
And that's
all right.
correct. On.
All right. Thank you.